Hi guys, this is my sample presentation. Before I dive in, I want to talk to you a little bit about how to record your presentation. There are two ways you can do it. The first is that you can use the slideshow function in PowerPoint. To do that, you go to slideshow in the top ribbon. If you want to practice, you choose rehearse timings, or when you're ready to record, you can select record slideshow. I'm doing this presentation in Screencast-O-Matic. And what Screencast-O-Matic does is it puts a box around your screen and it lets you record anything within the box. If you choose this option, you're going to be able to show more on your screen than simply PowerPoint. For example, I'm going to close the PowerPoint now and you can see that this little guy down here is the recorder that you use to start recording what's on your screen. And so you can see my screen now. Okay, so Screencast-O-Matic is another way that you can do it, and I'm going to use Screencast-O-Matic in this version of my slideshow. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with my presentation, which is currently called The Rhetoric of Banning Books. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is that I might need to put quotes around the word banning, as you'll see here in a little bit. Just to start with, my research question is, what do the rhetorical patterns that emerge about banning books in the Mat-Su Borough School District tell us about the values under negotiation within that district? So here's a little bit about what's going on. The Matanuska-Susitna Borough School District is located near Anchorage, Alaska, and it's the second largest school district in all of Alaska, which is part of why it's gotten so much publicity for the fact that during a standard curriculum review, a team that's comprised of teachers, community members, and the curriculum council voted to remove a set of books that were deemed controversial from the school's high school reading list. There was a 5-2 vote in favor of removing these books. And what's interesting to me, and you can hear the rhetoric here, is that they call them quote unquote controversial books. These are the 5 books that they decided to remove, and they decided to remove them largely because of violence, sexual violence, and themes related to race. Now I'm going to take just a second here and pause and say you can see here that I am using 3 sources. I've got 2 popular media sources, the local newspaper, the Frontiersman News, and the New York Times. I also have my government document or my anchor text, which are the agenda item details that I found here in Board Docs. This is the agenda item for the Matanuska-Susitna Borough School District. So again, I've got here this article from the New York Times. I have an article somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. I had an article from the Frontiersman News somewhere. Here it is. And I'll be using a few more here in a few minutes. Actually, this is a great reminder when you find things, you may want to immediately save them because you don't want to get blocked out. You don't want to get paywalled out. Okay, so let's jump back into the PowerPoint here. I'm going to go ahead and open that again. Okay, when we listen to this conversation, we hear 3 big voices. The school board's majority, which wanted to remove the books, the school board's minority, which wanted to keep the books, and then the community. And as you're going to hear, the community is largely code for parents. So here are the constraints on the majority. They argue that it's their responsibility to take recommendations from the curriculum committee and to respond to concerns raised in the previous school board meeting. So their purpose is to respond to these concerns and take these recommendations. They argue that their primary audience is the curriculum committee and the community, which had input through the curriculum review process. And they use PowerPoints, charts, and social media posts to present their positions. Now, the primary documents that the curriculum committee used, those charts and PowerPoints, present themselves, their reasoning, and their choice to remove these documents in a very logical and considered fashion. Their use of curriculum documents and the logo of the district also grants them credibility. And just so that you can see here, this is what the charts look like. So you can see that there's a challenge and a rationale for keeping the books, as well as a discussion of the book itself. All of this feels really logical. And when you see that these books are presented here in this way, with both the reasons that we might exclude them and the reasons that we might keep them, it all feels really logical. We can also see here that this document is coming from the Office of Instruction, and that adds a lot of credibility to this argument. And I go back into my PowerPoint. So the school board argued that the removal of these books from the recommended reading list was designed to provide parents with more input and for supervision in what their children, the students, were actually going to be reading. And as you'll see, for some people, that was a compelling argument. Following the vote, after the school board began to face criticism of censorship, board members responded in ways that were both logical and emotional. And I want to show you a Facebook post from V. Jeff Taylor, who is a member of the board. So here he is on Facebook, and I want to highlight a couple of things for you. Note this sentence here. The Frontiersman News tweeted a very irresponsible tweet that stated that they had banned the 5 books. He says this was shocking to everyone who read it, myself included. That's clearly an emotional appeal. But then look here, look, he goes on and he combines both logic and emotion. Ban means to officially or legally prohibit. That's a pretty logical conclusion. He says, I want to say this very loudly. These books are not banned. They are on bookshelves, they are in teachers' libraries, they are available and could be recognized and recommended as great literary works. They could be discussed and written about. They are not banned. Look, this is a really logical argument here using this definition, and it is combined with some very emotional punctuation and formatting here. So what we have from V. Jeff Taylor is a combination of emotion and logic. So let's turn now to the school board's minority. They argue that they are representing best practices from across the country in curriculum development and that they're trying to keep these students on track with other high schools across the country. The minority argues that they're speaking for the community, particularly those voices that aren't represented on the curriculum committee. They took advantage of the news media to make their minority view heard. The primary voice representing the minority in the media was Sarah Welton, who also used both emotion and logic. Here's what she said in the New York Times article. To me, she says, the need for controversial subjects is a part of education. You can hear the logic in that. She's arguing about the purpose of education. She goes on to say, the societal issues brought forth in all of the books reflect their continued need for people to learn about experiences other than their own. Protecting students by hiding the issues or ignoring the issues does not help or prepare students for the world they inherit. We can hear both logic and emotion in this. There's logic in that, again, she's still talking about the purpose of education, but notice too the emotional words like hiding the issues or ignoring the issues. There's also emotion in the implications here. What parent wants their kid to be unprepared, underprepared, or sheltered? The community has some constraints too. Now remember, I said the community is largely code for parents. And those parents' larger goal is to express themselves and their own values in response to the decisions made by the school board. The community members are attempting to persuade other community members, and they also want to get the attention of the board, either to support the decision or to get the board to change its mind. And it's important here to note that parents don't speak in a unified voice. Some support the board and some do not. Some community members express their support on social media, so you can see them show up in the comments to that Facebook post that I showed you earlier. Others created some actual community programs to resist what the school board was doing. So some parents responding to the school board member's Facebook post really bought into his argument and the board's argument that they were being given the opportunity to have input into the process. They felt that they'd been given more to say, more of a say in the books that their children would be reading. Some members of the community felt that the books were being problematically banned, and they pushed back. One lawyer and bookstore owner created a competition, and they offered $100 to every high school student who read all 5 of the banned books. And then some members of the community took a third way, and they argued that their voices hadn't been heard because the school board didn't have time and place for public comment due to COVID-19 restrictions. And here's what all of this has me wondering. How often does this happen? Who should ultimately be responsible for deciding what students read? Is that the parents' job? Is that educators' job? What happens when parents and educators clash? Does it matter if some high school students aren't exposed to the same things that other high school students are exposed to? As a result of my initial reading in the primary documents, I've narrowed my research question even more. What does the rhetoric about parental input and student preparedness in the Mat-Su School District's decision to take these books off their list tell us about what this community values in education? Thanks, everybody.